The summer sun hung low in the sky, casting long shadows across Clara's yard as she returned home from a day spent exploring the nearby lake with friends. The air was thick with the scent of blooming flowers and freshly cut grass, a typical summer fragrance that usually brought her comfort. However, today, an unfamiliar chill ran down her spine as she approached her bicycle, propped against the fence. Clara noticed something unusual, a small, folded piece of paper taped to the handlebars. Her heart raced as she reached for it, the casual excitement of the day giving way to a growing sense of unease. She unfolded the note, her brow furrowing as she read the jagged handwriting. "I see you." Clara felt a shiver run through her. Who would leave such a message? "Hey Clara, you coming in?" Lucas, her older brother, called from inside the house, his voice cutting through her thoughts. He leaned against the doorframe, a protective look on his face, though she could see the shadows of worry beneath his calm exterior. "Yeah, just a second," she replied, glancing around the yard. The trees loomed larger than usual, their branches swaying gently in the breeze, almost as if they were whispering secrets. Clara hurried inside, the note clenched tightly in her fist. Once in the safety of her home, she tossed the note onto the kitchen table and poured herself a glass of water. Lucas entered, eyeing her curiously. "What's up? You look like you've seen a ghost," he teased, though his eyes betrayed a hint of concern. "It's nothing," Clara lied, not wanting to burden him with her strange discovery. But the nagging feeling of being watched lingered in her mind. "Just found a weird note on my bike." Lucas raised an eyebrow, clearly intrigued. "Weird how? Like a love letter or something?" He chuckled, but Clara could sense his unease. "Not exactly, it just said, 'I see you.'" She tried to keep her tone light, but the words hung heavy in the air. Lucas's smile faded. "That's creepy, Clara. You sure it's not just some prank?" "Prank or not, it's unsettling. I don't like it. Look, it's probably just some kids messing around. You know how bored they get during summer." He shrugged, but she could see the worry etched into his features. That night the house was quiet, but Clara found it difficult to sleep. The shadows danced across her room, and the memories of the note kept replaying in her mind. She tossed and turned, finally deciding to peer out her window into the darkness that enveloped their yard. The moon cast an eerie glow, illuminating the trees that bordered their property. As she squinted, trying to make sense of the shapes beyond the fence, her breath hitched. Dark figures flitted between the trees, their forms indistinct and fleeting. Clara's heart raced as she gripped the window frame, fear gripping her. Were they real, or was her mind playing tricks on her? "Lucas," she whispered urgently, not wanting to disturb the night. "Lucas, wake up." After a moment, her brother groggily appeared in the doorway, his hair tousled and eyes heavy with sleep. "What's wrong?" "Look outside," she urged, pointing toward the window. Lucas stepped closer, peering into the darkness as Clara held her breath. "I don't see anything," he said, his voice laced with skepticism. "But I did. There were people, shadowy figures." "Clara, it's probably just the trees. You've been on edge since that note. Just try to relax, okay?" But as he turned to leave, Clara couldn't shake the feeling that something was very wrong. She watched him walk back to his room, the unease settling like a heavy blanket over her heart. The shadows outside were still, but her mind raced with questions and fears. Who was watching her, and why? With a resolve she didn't quite understand, Clara decided she would find out. She would uncover the truth behind the cryptic note and the ominous figures lurking in the night. Clara stood in her backyard, the sun dipping low in the sky, casting long shadows that danced eerily across the ground. The vibrant green of the grass seemed muted under the weight of the unsettling events that had transpired since her return home. She clutched her notebook, filled with hastily scribbled notes about the cryptic messages she had found on her bicycle. Each note felt like a piece of a puzzle, yet the bigger picture remained maddeningly out of reach. "What if it's just a prank, Clara?" Lucas had said, his voice edged with a mix of concern and disbelief. "You're reading too much into it. Kids around here can be weird sometimes." But Clara couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to it than that. She flipped through the pages of her notebook, tracing her finger over the words. The first note had been alarming, but each subsequent one had only deepened her sense of dread. "Someone is watching me," she whispered to herself, feeling the weight of the words settle in her chest like a stone. Determined to uncover the truth, Clara took a deep breath and decided to investigate the woods behind her house. The sun was beginning to set, and the shadows grew longer, but her curiosity pushed her forward. She stepped cautiously among the trees, the crunch of leaves underfoot echoing in the stillness. As she ventured deeper, she spotted the strange markings on the bark of the trees, symbols that looked almost like arrows. They seemed to be pointing in the direction of her home. "Why would someone mark these trees?" Clara muttered under her breath, her heart racing as she jotted down her observations. She felt a chill in the air, as if the forest itself was holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. Suddenly, a rustle in the bushes made her freeze. "Hello?" she called out, her voice trembling slightly. The only response was the distant call of a bird, but she could feel the hairs on the back of her neck prickling. She turned to leave, her mind racing with possibilities, when she spotted something white fluttering in the breeze. It was another note pinned to her bicycle, which she had left propped against a tree. Clara's heart sank as she approached it, her hands trembling. The note read, "You shouldn't have come back." Clara's breath caught in her throat. Panic surged through her, and she quickly glanced around, convinced that someone was watching her, lurking just out of sight. "What does this mean?" she asked herself, her voice barely above a whisper. She felt a mix of fear and anger rising within her. "Lucas!" she shouted, suddenly wishing her brother was there to help her make sense of this madness. "You need to see this, now!" She hurried back to the house, clutching the note tightly in her fist. Lucas was in the living room, his eyes glued to the television, but he turned as Clara burst through the door, panting and wide-eyed. "Clara, what's wrong?" he asked, concern etched on his face. She held out the note, her fingers shaking. "Look at this, it's another message. They're watching me, Lucas. This isn't just in my head." Lucas took the note and read it, his brow furrowing. "Okay, this is unsettling. But we need to think logically. Maybe it's someone just messing with you." "No, Lucas, it feels real," Clara insisted, her voice rising in desperation. "What if it's serious? What if they want to hurt me?" Lucas sighed, running a hand through his hair. "I get that you're scared, but let's not jump to conclusions. We can figure this out together." Clara crossed her arms, frustration boiling over. "Together? You mean like last time, when you brushed me off? You think I'm being dramatic, but this is real." "Clara, calm down," he said, his tone firm, yet gentle. "Let's take a step back. We'll check the yard, see if we can find any clues." As they stepped outside, Clara couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. The shadows of the trees stretched ominously around them, and an unsettling silence enveloped the yard. Clara glanced over her shoulder, half expecting to see someone lurking behind the trees, but there was nothing but the whisper of the wind. "I don't like this," she whispered, her voice trembling. "Neither do I," Lucas admitted, his brow furrowed. "But we can't let fear control us. We need to stay vigilant and figure out what's going on." Clara nodded, but her heart felt heavy with dread. The notes, the strange markings, and the overwhelming sense of being watched, all of it pointed to something dark lurking just beyond the edges of their lives. And she was determined to uncover the truth no matter the cost. Clara had spent the entire afternoon pacing around her room, her mind racing with unanswered questions and a growing sense of dread. The cryptic notes, the strange markings in the woods, and now the chilling warning left on her bicycle felt like pieces of a puzzle that she was desperate to solve. But the more she tried to connect the dots, the more elusive the truth became. With determination flickering in her chest, she resolved to confront Mrs. Oliveira, the reclusive neighbor whose garden was a jungle of overgrown plants and shadows. Perhaps she held the key to the unsettling occurrences that had begun to haunt Clara's summer. As Clara approached Mrs. Oliveira's house, she felt a shiver of apprehension run down her spine. The old woman was often seen tending to her garden, muttering to herself or staring blankly at the sky, as if lost in another world. Clara knocked hesitantly on the wooden door, the sound echoing in the stillness of the late afternoon. After a moment of silence, The door creaked open, revealing Mrs. Oliveira with her wild silver hair and piercing eyes that seemed to see right through Clara. "Ah, Clara," Mrs. Oliveira said, her voice low and gravelly. "What brings you here, child?" Clara swallowed hard, summoning her courage. I was hoping you could help me. Strange things have been happening around my house. I found notes and there are markings in the woods. I thought, maybe you might know something?" Mrs. Oliveira studied her for a moment, her gaze penetrating. "Strange things, you say? This neighborhood has always had its secrets, dear." Clara's heart raced. "What do you mean?" The old woman stepped aside, motioning for Clara to enter. "Come in. It's easier to speak without the prying eyes of the world. But be warned, the truth can be a heavy burden." Clara hesitated before stepping over the threshold, the air inside the house thick with the scent of dried herbs and something musky. The walls were lined with books, their spines cracked and faded, as if they had been read countless times. Clara followed Mrs. Oliveira into a dimly lit room filled with shadowy corners. "Sit," the woman instructed, pointing to a threadbare armchair. Clara complied, her heart thudding in her chest. "Now tell me everything." After recounting the events of the past few weeks, Clara watched as Mrs. Oliveira's expression shifted from curiosity to something darker. "You must understand, Clara, that this area has a history. There have been disappearances, children who wandered too far into the woods and never returned." Clara's breath hitched. "What? I didn't know that." "Most don't," Mrs. Oliveira replied, her voice dropping to a whisper. "But I've seen things. Shadows that move on their own, whispers carried by the wind. You must stay vigilant, child. The woods hold many secrets, and not all of them are friendly." "Do you think someone is watching me?" Clara asked, her voice trembling. Mrs. Oliveira nodded slowly. "It is possible. The notes you found, they may be a warning or a taunt. Whoever is behind them knows you, knows your fears. The question is why?" As Clara absorbed the weight of the woman's words, her mind raced with possibilities. Was someone truly stalking her? And if so, what did they want? The conversation felt heavy, like a thick fog settling around her. "Have you seen anyone suspicious?" Clara pressed, desperation creeping into her tone. Mrs. Oliveira leaned closer, her eyes narrowing. "There's a man who comes around at night. He moves like a shadow, slipping between the trees. I've seen him more than once. But I can't tell you who he is or what he wants." Clara felt a chill race down her spine. "What if he's the one leaving the notes?" "Then you must be careful," Mrs. Oliveira advised, her voice grave. "You are not just dealing with a curious observer. There are forces at play here that you do not understand." The atmosphere in the room shifted, and Clara felt the weight of the old woman's words settle like a stone in her stomach. She thanked Mrs. Oliveira and left, her mind swirling with fear and uncertainty. As she stepped outside, the sun dipped low in the sky, casting long shadows across the yard. That night, Clara lay in bed, her thoughts racing. The echoes of Mrs. Oliveira's warnings haunted her, intertwining with the sounds of the night. But it was a sudden shout from Lucas that jolted her from her restless reverie, a sound that sliced through the silence like a knife. "Clara, get up! Someone's in the yard!" Heart pounding, Clara leapt from her bed, the adrenaline surging through her veins. She rushed to her brother's room where he stood by the window, pale and wide-eyed. "What did you see?" Clara asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "I don't know. I saw a figure just for a second," Lucas replied, his voice shaking. "It was right by the trees." Clara's pulse quickened. "We have to check it out. We can't just ignore this." "Are you crazy?" "What if it's dangerous?" Lucas protested. But Clara was already pulling on her shoes, determination settling in her gut. "We need to know, Lucas. We can't let fear control us." With a reluctant nod, Lucas grabbed a flashlight, and together they steeled themselves against the unknown, stepping out into the darkness, ready to confront whatever lurked beyond their home. Clara and Lucas stepped cautiously into the night, armed with their flashlights, the beams slicing through the darkness like swords. Clara's heart raced, a hesitant rhythm that matched the rustling leaves around them. The air was thick with tension, and every shadow seemed to dance menacingly. "Do you really think someone was out here?" Lucas asked, trying to mask his own unease. His voice was steady, but Clara could hear the slight tremor that betrayed him. I don't know, Clara replied, her eyes scanning the periphery of the yard. But we heard you yelling. Something was definitely here. She pointed her flashlight toward the tree line, where the silhouettes of the trees loomed like sentinels. Look at these tracks. Lucas knelt down, inspecting the ground. They look like footsteps. He traced the imprints with his finger, frowning. But they're too small for an adult. Maybe a kid? What kid would be out here at this time? Clara retorted, her voice edged with irritation. We should go further into the woods. There's got to be something more. As they ventured deeper, the sounds of the night enveloped them, the chirping of crickets, the rustle of leaves, and the distant hoot of an owl. Each sound seemed amplified in the stillness, heightening Clara's sense of dread. Just as they reached a small clearing, Lucas's phone rang, breaking the silence. He fumbled for it, his face paling as he glanced at the screen. Unknown number, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. Should I answer? Are you kidding? It could be whoever's been leaving those notes. Just let it go to voicemail, Clara urged, her mind racing with possibilities. She felt the weight of the dark woods pressing in around them, a reminder that they weren't alone in this eerie scenario. Lucas hesitated, his fingers hovering over the screen. What if it's something important? Like what? Like another warning? Just ignore it. Clara's patience wore thin as she turned her focus back to the woods. Let's keep moving. With a reluctant nod, Lucas pocketed the phone, but Clara noticed the way his hands trembled. The tension between them was palpable, and she couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. They continued deeper into the woods, the flashlight beams flickering over the gnarled roots and underbrush, but they found nothing more than the remnants of the night. After what felt like hours, they made their way back to the house, their hearts still racing. Clara's mind buzzed with questions. Lucas, we need to do something. We can't just let this go. What do you mean? He replied, shutting the door behind them. We can't go on a wild goose chase every night. No, I mean we need to set up cameras. We have to catch whoever is stalking us. If they're bold enough to leave notes, they'll eventually show themselves. Clara's determination shone through her fearful demeanor. Lucas nodded, though uncertainty clouded his expression. All right, but you have to promise me that we won't jump to conclusions. This could all be a misunderstanding. Misunderstanding? Someone is watching us, Lucas. This is not a game. Clara's voice trembled with urgency. Fine, let's do it, he relented, his eyes darting around as if expecting someone to emerge from the shadows. They spent the next hour setting up cameras around the perimeter of their home, positioning them strategically to cover all angles. Clara felt a sense of empowerment as they worked together, but an undercurrent of dread still threaded through her thoughts. Once the cameras were in place, Clara couldn't help but feel that the real danger was lurking closer than they imagined. Do you think it's possible that someone inside the house knows something? She asked suddenly, turning to Lucas with a serious expression. Inside the house? Like who? Lucas raised an eyebrow, his skepticism evident. I don't know, but it feels like there's something more, something we're not seeing. Clara's voice dropped to a whisper, her breath hitching in her throat. What if it's someone we trust? Lucas scoffed, but Clara could see the flicker of doubt in his eyes. You're being paranoid, Clara. Just because we've found a few strange notes doesn't mean we should start suspecting everyone. Maybe, Clara conceded, though the nagging feeling wouldn't leave her. But I can't shake the thought that we're being watched, even when we're inside our own home. And if someone's inside, we need to be careful. Lucas sighed, running a hand through his hair, visibly shaken. Let's just wait for the footage. Maybe then we'll have some answers. As they settled in for the night, the oppressive silence of their home felt heavy with secrets. Clara glanced at the window, the darkness outside seemingly hungry for them, and she couldn't help but wonder what awaited them in the shadows. Clara sat on the edge of her bed, her heart racing as the camera footage played back on her laptop screen. The dim light from the monitor illuminated her face, reflecting the growing dread in her eyes. She replayed the segment over and over, unable to shake the chilling image of the shadowy figure loitering near their back door. Each viewing only heightened her anxiety. The figure remained elusive, obscured by darkness, but its presence felt undeniably menacing. Just as the figure turned slightly, the video abruptly cut off, leaving Clara with a sense of unfinished business, as if the tape itself was trying to hide something from her. "Lucas," she shouted, her voice echoing through the quiet house. "You need to see this." Her brother appeared at the door, his expression a mix of annoyance and concern. "What is it, Clara? Can't you see I'm busy?" "Busy with what?" she snapped, frustration bubbling over. "You're always busy these days, and I don't think it's just with schoolwork. You need to watch this." Lucas stepped into the room, his brow furrowing as he caught sight of the footage. As he watched, the color drained from his face. What is that?" he stammered, his voice barely above a whisper. Clara felt a surge of indignation. "That's what I want to know. Who is that? Why didn't you tell me about the phone call you received? This is serious." He sighed and ran a hand through his hair, a gesture Clara had come to recognize as his sign of distress. "I didn't think it was important," he muttered, avoiding her gaze. "Not important?" Clara exploded, standing up and pacing the small room. "A stranger lurking around our house, and that's not important to you? You're acting like everything is normal, but it's not. Lucas, we're in danger." "Clara, just calm down," he urged, his voice rising in frustration. "You're making a bigger deal out of this than it is. It's probably just some kids messing around." "Kids?" Clara echoed incredulously. "Do you really think that's what this is? This isn't just some prank. There's something wrong here." "Maybe you're just imagining it," Lucas shot back, anger flaring in his eyes. "You've been obsessed with these notes and shadows. It's messing with your head." "Obsessed?" Clara felt her heart sink at his words, the betrayal stinging deeper than she expected. "I'm trying to protect us. This isn't just about me. If you don't want to face the truth, fine. But I can't just sit back and do nothing." With that, Clara stormed out of the room, her emotions swirling in a chaotic storm of fear and anger. She needed air, space to think. As she made her way to the front porch, she found solace in the cool evening breeze, but it was short-lived. Her eyes fell on her bicycle, and a sense of dread washed over her. The bike had become a vessel of her fears, a reminder of the notes that tormented her. When she approached her bicycle, her breath hitched. There, on the handlebar, lay another note. She snatched it up, her heart pounding as she unfolded the paper. The words were scrawled in a hurried hand. "I know your secrets." A chill ran down her spine. Secrets? What secrets could anyone possibly know about her? The note felt like a direct threat, a taunt. Clara's mind raced, her thoughts spiraling. She thought of the strange happenings, the eerie shadows, and the unsettling feeling that someone was always watching. "Clara?" Lucas's voice broke through her haze, but she couldn't respond. She felt raw, exposed, like every thought and fear was laid bare for someone to see. "Did you find something?" he asked cautiously, stepping closer. She turned to him, her eyes fierce with determination. "We need to figure this out, Lucas. We can't ignore it anymore. The notes, the figure, it's all connected. And if you know something—" "I don't know anything," he interjected, his voice rising again. "I'm just as lost as you are." "Then we need to work together," Clara insisted, her voice steadying as resolve washed over her. "We can't let fear take over. We'll set up more cameras, talk to Mrs. Oliveira again, and dig deeper into what's going on." Lucas hesitated, his shoulders slumping as he exhaled slowly. Okay, let's do that," he finally agreed, though his voice lacked the conviction Clara hoped to hear. But as she stood there, the note clenched tightly in her fist, Clara couldn't shake the feeling that whatever shadows lurked around them were closer than they realized, and the secrets they held could shatter everything they knew. Clara paced back and forth in her dimly lit room, the weight of the latest note heavy in her mind. "I know your secrets." The words echoed ominously, gnawing at her resolve. With each passing moment, her determination solidified. She needed answers, and the only person she could truly confront was Lucas. With her heart racing, she knocked on his door, her knuckles rapping against the wood as if she were drumming up courage. "Lucas, can we talk?" she called out, her voice steady despite the turmoil inside her. After a moment of silence, the door creaked open, revealing her brother with a look of surprise mixed with something else. "Fear? What's going on, Clara?" His tone was cautious, as if he already sensed the gravity of what she was about to say. Please, just hear me out, she insisted, stepping into his room, the familiar chaos of his belongings providing a strange comfort in the midst of her anxiety. I found another note. It's different this time, and I think it's connected to everything that's been happening. Lucas looked down, his expression shifting to one of concern. You need to let this go. It's probably just some kids messing around. We shouldn't let it get to us. Lucas, this isn't just some prank. I've been keeping track of the notes, the patterns, the tracks in the yard. Something isn't right, and it feels like someone is watching us. Clara's voice rose slightly, her frustration spilling over. And then there's your phone call. What was that about? His eyes flickered, a shadow passing over his features. I told you it was nothing, just a wrong number. Stop lying to me, Clara snapped, her patience fraying. I can feel that you're hiding something. You seem different lately, and I can't shake the feeling that it has to do with all of this. Lucas took a deep breath, his shoulders slumping as if the weight of the world rested upon them. Fine, you want the truth? There's something I need to tell you, but you might not want to hear it. Clara's heart raced as she stepped closer, sensing the shift in the air. What is it? I've been in contact with someone you wouldn't expect. Lucas's voice trembled slightly, and Clara felt a chill creep down her spine. It's our father. The room fell silent, the implications of his words washing over Clara like icy water. What? Lucas, he's been gone for years. How could you? Her voice faltered, the reality of his admission crashing into her. Clara, listen, he urged, his eyes wide with urgency. He's alive. I've been talking to him. He's been trying to reach out, and I thought it was just a bad idea at first, but... His voice trailed off, the weight of his confession hanging heavily between them. Clara staggered back, her mind racing. You mean to tell me that the notes, the figure in the woods, this could all be connected to him? Why didn't you tell me sooner? I didn't want to put you in danger, Lucas said, his voice breaking. I thought I could handle it, but now I realize I've put you at risk by keeping this from you. He said he wanted to see you, but I thought it was too dangerous. Dangerous? How could you think that? Do you realize that all this time I might have been leading him to you? Clara's voice cracked, the weight of their father's absence pressing down on her chest. He's been watching us, hasn't he? Lucas nodded slowly, the guilt etched across his face. I didn't want to believe it either, but I thought if I learned more about what happened to him, maybe I could protect you from whatever he's become. I didn't want to drag you into it. Clara felt her heart shatter. The pieces of the puzzle fell into place, and she struggled to comprehend the images forming in her mind. You should have told me, she whispered, her voice barely audible. Now I don't know who to trust. Clara, please, I know this is a lot to process, but we need to stick together. Whatever he wants, whatever has happened, we can face it, but we need to do it as a team. Lucas pleaded, stepping closer. Can we really? Clara felt tears prick at her eyes, a mixture of anger and sadness boiling within her. How can we face something that we don't even understand? In that moment, Clara realized that they were standing on the precipice of a revelation that could shatter their already fragile world. Their father, the figure behind the notes, the shadow lurking in the corners of their lives, was poised to return, and with him, the secrets of the past that might finally explain the darkness that had haunted their family for years. In the summer of 1996, a thick haze of humidity enveloped the small village of São Vicente. The air was heavy with the scent of damp earth and wildflowers, a deceptive tranquility that cloaked the shadows lurking just beneath the surface. Luan, a tall young man with tousled hair and an adventurous spirit, stood at the doorway of the rented cabin, taking in the surroundings. The cabin was nestled among towering trees, their leaves whispering secrets in the gentle breeze. This place is perfect, he exclaimed, a wide grin spreading across his face. Behind him, Mariana, a spirited girl with a penchant for exploration, rolled her eyes playfully. Let's just hope it's not haunted, she teased, stepping into the cabin, or we'll never get any sleep. Felipe, the pragmatic one of the group, chuckled as he followed them inside. Haunted or not, I'm just here for the break, he replied, tossing his backpack onto one of the rustic wooden chairs. Anna, quiet yet observant, lingered at the entrance, her gaze fixed on the forest that bordered the cabin. As they settled in, Luan's curiosity got the better of him. "I'm going to check the attic," he announced, his eyes gleaming with excitement. "Who knows what treasures we might find." "Just don't fall through the ceiling," Felipe called after him, laughter echoing in the cozy space. Luan climbed the creaky wooden stairs, each step a reminder of the cabin's age. Dust motes danced in the slivers of light filtering through the small window as he reached the attic. The space was cluttered with old furniture draped in white sheets, and in the corner, he spotted a small weathered trunk. With a grunt, he pried it open, revealing an array of yellowed papers and a diary. "This is interesting," Luan muttered to himself, flipping through the pages. The entries were written in an elegant script, chronicling the life of a woman named Clara, who had once lived in the cabin. As he read deeper, a chill crept down his spine. Clara's descent into madness was recorded in haunting detail, her words spiraling from mundane observations to frantic proclamations of unseen horrors. "Luan, what did you find?" Mariana's voice called from below, pulling him from his unsettling reverie. "An old diary," he shouted back, his curiosity piqued. "You guys need to come see this." Within moments, Mariana and Felipe clambered up the stairs, followed by Ana, who seemed more hesitant than the others. "What's so special about a dusty old book?" she asked, crossing her arms. "Just read this," Luan urged, handing it to Mariana. As she skimmed through the pages, her expression shifted from skeptical to concerned. "This is disturbing. Look at this part about the voices," she said, her voice dropping to a whisper. Felipe leaned in closer, eyebrows furrowing as he read over her shoulder. "This is just some old woman's ramblings, right? Surely it can't mean anything." But before they could dismiss it entirely, a sudden rustling outside interrupted their discussion. Ana's heart raced as she exchanged glances with her friends. "Did you hear that?" "Probably just a squirrel," Felipe shrugged, but his voice lacked conviction. Later that night, the group gathered around a crackling fire outside, the flames casting flickering shadows on their faces. Laughter filled the air as they shared ghost stories, the tension of the day slowly dissolving into mirth. Luan animatedly recounted a tale about a vengeful spirit, his voice echoing in the stillness. "Okay, but what if it's true? What if she's still out there?" Mariana teased, her eyes sparkling with mischief. "Then I hope she likes campfire songs," Felipe joked, strumming an imaginary guitar. But their laughter was abruptly cut short by a piercing scream that echoed through the night, chilling them to the bone. The woods, once a backdrop of adventure, now felt like an ominous entity, alive with malevolence. "What was that?" Ana whispered, her voice barely above a breath. "Maybe it's just the wind," Luan suggested, though his heart raced in his chest. "Or maybe it's someone in trouble," Mariana countered, her playful demeanor replaced by a sense of dread. As silence fell over the group, they exchanged uneasy glances, the warmth of the fire suddenly feeling inadequate against the encroaching darkness of the woods. The night stretched on, thick with tension, as the friends grappled with the reality that their vacation was about to take a turn they could never have anticipated. As the sun rose over the dense Brazilian jungle, a thick mist clung to the air, wrapping around the cabin like a shroud. Felipe stirred in his bed, the remnants of a restless night lingering in his mind. He rubbed his eyes and sat up, glancing around the room. Something felt off. His belongings, which he had meticulously arranged the night before, were now scattered across the floor. His backpack was open, and items he swore he'd placed in the bottom were now on display, as if someone, or something, had rifled through them. "Mariana, Luan, Ana," he called out, his voice echoing slightly in the stillness. He swung his legs over the side of the bed, his heart racing, and hurriedly dressed. The cabin, once a cozy refuge, now felt like an unsettling cage. He stepped into the main room, where he found the others seated around the kitchen table, their expressions mirroring his own confusion and growing anxiety. "Did any of you touch my stuff?" Felipe demanded, half joking, but the edge in his voice betrayed his unease. "What do you mean?" Luan replied, looking up from a cup of coffee. "I thought you were the one who rearranged the place. You know how you like everything just so." Felipe shook his head vehemently. "No, I swear. It's like someone went through my bag. Anna, her face pale, spoke up. I had a really strange nightmare last night. It felt so real. There was a girl running through the woods, and she kept looking back like someone was chasing her. Mariana frowned, her brow furrowing with concern. You mentioned that before. Maybe it's just stress from the trip. We should go explore the village today, take our minds off things. Or maybe we should just leave, Felipe suggested, his voice low. This place is giving me the creeps. Luan looked at his friends, trying to gauge their reactions. Come on, let's not jump to conclusions. It's probably just our imaginations. We've been reading that creepy diary, and now we're spooking ourselves. Speaking of which, Anna interjected, I still can't shake the feeling that it was watching us. I don't want to say it's haunted, but before she could finish her thought, a faint sound drifted through the open window, a whisper that sent chills racing down their spines. The friends exchanged uneasy glances. Did you hear that? Felipe asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Mariana nodded slowly, her eyes widening. It came from the woods. Felipe's heart raced as he recalled the whispers Anna had mentioned. Maybe we should go check it out then. If we're going to be scared, we might as well face it. With a shared sense of trepidation, they decided to leave the cabin behind for the day. As they stepped outside, the sun glared down, but a strange heaviness lingered in the air, thickening the atmosphere around them. They spent the day wandering through the village, trying to shake the oppressive feeling that had settled over them. The locals were friendly, yet evasive, their smiles too wide, their eyes darting away whenever the group asked about the history of the area. Why are they acting so weird? Felipe murmured as they walked back toward the cabin, the weight of the day settling heavily on his shoulders. Maybe they know something we don't, Luan replied, glancing back at the village, which seemed to loom larger with every step. When they finally returned to the cabin, a sense of dread washed over them. The door creaked open, revealing a darkened interior that felt even more foreboding than before. Where's the diary? Anna's voice trembled as she looked around, and it became painfully clear that the book was missing. Felipe's stomach dropped. I left it right here on the table, he said, searching the room frantically. We have to find it. It might be the key to understanding what's happening. Or it could be the reason we're in trouble, Mariana murmured, her eyes darting toward the shadowy corners of the cabin. As they began to search, the air thickened with an unsettling silence, punctuated only by the sound of their hurried footsteps. Each passing moment deepened the sense of dread, and the feeling of being watched crept back into their minds. Let's split up and look, Luan suggested, his voice steady despite the growing weight of fear. Reluctantly, they agreed, each one of them feeling the oppressive atmosphere pressing down as they ventured into different rooms. The cabin now a labyrinth of shadows and whispered fears. Each creak of the floorboards seemed to echo in the stillness, amplifying their sense of isolation. As Felipe searched the bedroom, his heart raced, and he couldn't shake the feeling that they were not alone. Shadows flickered at the edges of his vision, and he called out for his friends, but only silence answered him, wrapping around him like the mist outside. As the sun climbed higher in the sky, its rays struggled to penetrate the dense canopy of the forest that surrounded the cabin. Luan and Mariana stood at the edge of the woods, their hearts pounding in a mix of fear and curiosity. The symbols carved into the trees had haunted their thoughts since Mariana's discovery, and now they felt compelled to find their origin. Are you sure we should be doing this? Mariana asked, her voice trembling slightly as she brushed a stray hair behind her ear. The air was thick with humidity, and the forest felt alive with noises, rustling leaves, distant bird calls, and the occasional snap of a twig underfoot. Luan nodded, steeling himself. We need to know what we're dealing with. If those symbols mean something, we can't just ignore them. He glanced back at the cabin where Felipe and Anna were still inside, trying to shake off the lingering dread that had settled over them since they found the diary. Besides, we can't let our fear control us. Mariana took a deep breath, trying to muster the courage that Luan seemed to exude. Okay, let's find out what this is all about, she said, her resolve hardening. Together they stepped into the forest, the sunlight dimming as they ventured deeper. As they walked, Luan pointed out the symbols etched into the bark of the trees. "Look at this one," he said, crouching down to get a closer look. "It almost looks like it's been here for a long time." The carving was intricate, a swirl of lines and shapes that seemed to pulse with an otherworldly energy. "What if it's a warning?" Mariana suggested, her eyes wide. "What if someone, or something, wants us to stay away?" "Or it could be a message from someone who used to live here," Luan countered, trying to keep the atmosphere light, despite the encroaching shadows that filled the space around them. "We won't know until we keep going." They pressed on, the underbrush thickening around them as they followed a narrow winding path. Soon, they stumbled upon a clearing. In the center stood an old, crumbling stone structure, half consumed by nature. Vines snaked up its walls, and the air felt charged, as if they had stepped into a forgotten world. "What is this place?" Mariana whispered, her voice barely above a breath. Luan approached cautiously, peering through the broken archway. "I don't know, but it feels important," he replied. He stepped inside, the coolness of the shaded stone providing a brief respite from the heat outside. As he turned to call out to Mariana, something caught his eye: a series of gravestones, partially obscured by the overgrowth. "Mariana, come here!" he shouted, urgency lacing his tone. She hurried inside, her heart racing at the sight of the stones. "What did you find?" Luan pointed to a gravestone that bore the same markings they had seen earlier. "Look, it's the same symbol." Mariana's breath hitched as she studied the stone. "It looks like it's a grave," she said, stepping closer. "Who is it for?" Luan brushed away the leaves and dirt, revealing the name etched into the stone: Isadora. A chill ran down Mariana's spine. "Isadora, like the girl in the diary?" Before Luan could respond, a sudden laughter echoed through the trees, light and playful yet hauntingly out of place. Both friends froze, their eyes widening in disbelief. "Did you hear that?" Luan asked, his voice low and cautious. Mariana nodded, fear creeping into her voice. "It sounds like a child." "Here, but there are no kids around," Luan replied, scanning the clearing as if expecting to see someone jump out from behind a tree. "We should go back. This is too weird." As they turned to leave, the laughter rang out again, this time closer, sending a shiver down their spines. It felt as if the forest itself was watching them, waiting. "Let's just get back to the cabin," Mariana urged, her voice trembling. "We can figure this out with the others." Luan nodded, and together they retraced their steps, the laughter echoing in their minds as they hurried back through the trees. The unease settled heavily in their stomachs, an unspoken agreement that something was dreadfully wrong in this place. Back at the cabin, they found Felipe and Ana seated at the kitchen table, deep in conversation. Upon seeing their friends' pale faces, Felipe raised an eyebrow. "What happened out there?" Luan and Mariana exchanged a glance before Luan spoke. "We found something unsettling." Ana leaned forward, her eyes wide with concern. "What do you mean?" Mariana took a deep breath, her heart racing as she shared their discovery. As she recounted their encounter with the grave, the symbols, and the laughter, the atmosphere in the cabin shifted, tension coiling in the air like a storm cloud about to burst. Felipe's expression hardened. "We need to leave this place, now." "No," Luan interjected, determination flickering in his eyes. "We need to understand what's happening here. There's something we're missing." The group fell silent, each friend grappling with their own fears and the ominous reality that surrounded them. The laughter still echoed in their ears, a chilling reminder that their summer vacation had taken a dark turn, and the shadows in the forest were growing ever closer. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting eerie shadows across the cabin, Ana sat cross-legged on the floor, the old diary spread out before her. The flickering flames of the fireplace danced in her wide eyes as she examined a photograph that had slipped from between the brittle pages. It was an image of a girl, her features hauntingly similar to Ana's own. The girl's long, dark hair framed a delicate face, and her expression was a mix of innocence and sorrow, as if she carried the weight of the world on her small shoulders. "Ana, what's wrong?" Luan asked, his voice breaking the heavy silence that enveloped the room. He leaned closer, intrigued by the photograph's grip on her attention. This girl, she looks just like me, Anna whispered, her voice trembling. She held the photo up for the others to see. I think there's something about this place that connects us. Felipe, who had been pacing near the window, stopped abruptly. What do you mean? You can't possibly think you're related to some girl from 100 years ago. His tone was skeptical, but a hint of concern flickered in his eyes. I don't know, but look at her eyes. They're the same, Anna insisted, her heart racing. Maybe I have to figure out what happened to her. Mariana, who had been standing quietly by the fireplace, spoke up. We need to be careful, Anna. There's something deeply unsettling about this place. It's like we're being watched. Luan furrowed his brow as he recalled the whispers that had haunted Mariana during the previous nights. That's not all. I've been having these vivid visions of the girl in the photograph. She's always there, looking at me, reaching out as if she needs help. What do you mean, visions? Felipe asked, crossing his arms defensively. Are you saying you're seeing things that aren't there? It's not like that, Luan snapped, frustration bubbling to the surface. It feels real, Felipe, like she's trying to tell me something. I can't shake the feeling that we're part of something much bigger than ourselves. The room fell into a tense silence as the weight of Luan's words settled upon them. Anna felt a mix of fear and determination. We should hold a séance, she suggested suddenly, her voice resolute. If there's a spirit here, we need to communicate with it. Maybe it can tell us what happened. Felipe's eyes widened in alarm. Are you out of your mind? We don't know what we're messing with. What if we unleash something we can't control? Mariana nodded in agreement, her voice steady. We need to think this through. There's too much going on already. We're not prepared for a séance. But Anna was insistent. We can't ignore this. I feel like it's our only chance to understand what's happening. Please, let's do it. After much debate, the group reluctantly agreed. They gathered around the dining table, candles flickering ominously in the dim light. The air felt charged with tension as they joined hands, their palms clammy against one another. Anna closed her eyes, focusing on the photograph, urging the spirit to come forth. Is anyone there? Anna called softly, her voice barely above a whisper. We want to help you. As if in response, the wind outside howled fiercely, rattling the windows. A sudden clap of thunder echoed across the sky, and rain began to pound against the cabin roof. The atmosphere shifted, as if the world outside had come alive with a violent energy. Maybe we should stop this, Felipe said, his voice edged with panic as the storm intensified. It feels wrong. But before he could pull away, the candles flickered violently, casting erratic shadows across the room. Luan's heart raced as he felt a cold breeze sweep through the cabin, extinguishing the flames. The darkness was suffocating, wrapping around them like a shroud. Stay calm, Anna urged, her voice steady despite the chaos. I'm still here. We're still together. Suddenly, a loud crash echoed from the kitchen, causing everyone to jump. What was that? Mariana gasped, her eyes wide with terror. I don't know, but we need to stick together, Luan said, his voice firm as he squeezed Anna's hand. Whatever is happening, we need to face it together. Just then, a blinding flash of lightning illuminated the room, and for a brief moment, they all saw it. A shadowy figure standing in the corner, its eyes glowing with an otherworldly light. A collective gasp escaped their lips as the storm outside raged on, trapping them within the cabin's walls. Did you see that? Felipe shouted, his voice rising above the roar of the storm. We need to get out of here. But as the winds howled and the rain pounded relentlessly, they realized they were no longer in control. The storm had become a manifestation of their fears, and whatever awaited them in the shadows was far more menacing than they had anticipated. With their hearts pounding and dread settling heavily in their chests, they braced themselves for the unknown forces lurking just beyond their reach. The air was thick with tension as the friends sat around the table, the flickering candlelight casting erratic shadows on the walls of the cabin. They had gathered for the séance in a desperate attempt to uncover the mysteries that plagued them. Luan's heart raced as he placed his hands on the table, the rough wood cool against his palms. He glanced at Mariana, who looked equally apprehensive, her eyes darting around the dimly lit room. Are we really going to do this? Felipe asked, his voice barely above a whisper. He shifted uncomfortably in his chair, glancing at Anna, who had insisted on this gathering. She nodded, her expression resolute. "We need answers," she said, her voice steady but tinged with an edge of fear. "Maybe we can find a way to communicate with whatever is haunting us." As they formed a circle, Luan felt a chill sweep through the room, causing him to shiver involuntarily. They began to chant, their voices overlapping, creating an eerie harmony that filled the cabin. The candle flames danced wildly, casting elongated shadows that flickered like living entities on the walls. Suddenly, the lights flickered, plunging the room into darkness for a brief moment. When the light returned, the atmosphere had changed. A palpable heaviness filled the space, and Luan felt a strange force pressing down on him. "What's happening?" he gasped, his heart pounding in his chest. Then, without warning, the table began to shake violently. Objects around the room started to rattle. A vase clattered to the floor, shattering into 1,000 pieces. Panic erupted as the friends scrambled to hold onto the table, trying to maintain their connection. "Stop it! Stop it!" Felipe shouted, his voice rising above the chaos. But it was too late. An unseen force surged through the room, lifting him off the ground and hurling him violently against the wall. The impact echoed through the cabin, and a pained groan escaped his lips as he crumpled to the floor, clutching his arm. "Felipe!" Mariana screamed, rushing towards him. The fear in her voice was palpable, and Luan felt a surge of adrenaline. He pushed himself away from the table, instinctively moving to help his friend. "Are you okay?" he asked, kneeling beside Felipe, who grimaced in pain. "Get out! We need to get out of here!" Felipe gasped, his voice strained. The cabin felt alive, the walls seeming to pulsate with malevolence. Luan looked at Anna, who was still seated, her eyes wide, staring into the darkness as if entranced. "Anna, come on," he urged, shaking her gently. But she didn't respond. Instead, a low whisper filled the room, a chilling sound that sent shivers down their spines. It was a voice, distorted and echoing, speaking words they couldn't understand. Luan's stomach dropped as he recognized the tone. It wasn't friendly. "Let's go!" Mariana shouted, pulling Luan and Felipe to their feet. They stumbled towards the door, but as they reached for the handle, the cabin seemed to shift. The entrance was no longer where they remembered. "What the hell?" Luan exclaimed, panic rising in his throat. The familiar layout of the cabin had morphed into a confusing maze, the walls closing in around them. "Over here!" Felipe shouted, pointing to a window. They rushed towards it, but the glass was opaque, with an unnatural fog, obscuring their view of the outside world. "Can't you see it's not safe?" Luan cried, desperate to escape. He turned to Anna once more. "We have to get her out of here." Mariana grabbed Anna's arm, trying to pull her up. But Anna remained frozen, her face pale and eyes wide, as if she were staring into the abyss. "Anna!" Luan shouted again, his voice breaking with urgency. Before they could react, the floorboards creaked ominously, and a dark shadow loomed over them, coalescing into a figure that seemed to rise from the depths of the cabin. It was formless yet defined, an embodiment of their collective fears, and it stretched towards them, hungry and insatiable. "Run!" Luan yelled, breaking through the paralysis gripping his friends. They bolted towards the back door, but the cabin seemed to twist and turn, disorienting them further. "Where is it? Where is the door?" Felipe gasped, his breath ragged. "Keep moving," Mariana urged, her eyes wide with terror. They stumbled through the darkness, feeling their way as the entity's whispers grew louder, filling their minds with dread. In that moment, they were no longer just friends. They were a desperate group fighting against an unseen terror. As they scrambled through the shifting shadows of the cabin, they realized that escape was no longer a certainty. It was a desperate race against something far more powerful than they had ever imagined. As the oppressive weight of the night settled over the cabin, Luan's heart raced with newfound urgency. After the chaos of the seance, he couldn't shake the feeling that something dark lingered in the air, a sinister presence that had been unleashed. He moved cautiously down the narrow staircase to the basement, the wooden steps creaking ominously beneath his weight. The flickering light from the lantern he carried cast ghostly shadows on the damp walls, adding to the sense of foreboding that enveloped him. At the bottom, the basement was a labyrinth of cobwebs and dust, a forgotten space that seemed to hold its breath. Luan's fingers brushed against the cold stone walls, searching for something, anything, that could explain the chaos they had just endured. As he turned a corner, he stumbled upon a partially hidden door, its edges worn and splintered. Driven by a mix of fear and curiosity, he pushed it open with a reluctant shove. Beyond the door lay a secret chamber. The air was thick with the smell of mildew and something acrid that made Luan's stomach churn. In the dim light, he could see remnants of dark rituals, candles long extinguished, scattered bones, and strange symbols carved into the stone. He stepped further inside, heart pounding, desperately trying to piece together the fragments of a history that felt all too familiar. Meanwhile, in the main room of the cabin, Mariana paced anxiously, her eyes darting toward Anna, who sat eerily still in the corner, her gaze unfocused. "Anna?" she called softly, desperation creeping into her voice. "Are you okay?" There was no response. Mariana felt a chill creep up her spine as she approached her friend. Anna's lips moved, but the words that escaped her were not her own. "The girl? She was sacrificed," Anna spoke, her voice deep and resonant, echoing with an otherworldly quality. Mariana gasped, stepping back. "Anna, please, come back to us." But Anna remained entranced, her eyes glazed over as she continued to speak. "To appease the vengeful spirit, they took me. They took me to the woods, to the altar." Mariana's breath caught in her throat. She felt the ground beneath her shift as panic surged within her. "Luan! Luan!" she screamed, her voice piercing the silence. But in the depths of the basement, Luan was unaware, consumed by the dark energy that seemed to radiate from the chamber. He picked up a rusted dagger, its blade glinting ominously in the lantern's light, and felt a surge of connection to the place. "Mariana, I found something," he shouted, but his voice echoed back at him, swallowed by the shadows. Just then, a bone-chilling wind swept through the chamber, extinguishing the lantern and plunging him into darkness. "Luan!" Mariana cried, her voice trembling. "Where are you?" She rushed toward the basement door, but as she reached for the handle, it slammed shut with a deafening bang. Panic surged through her veins. She turned back to Anna, who was still in her trance, the air thick with tension. "Anna," Mariana pleaded, shaking her friend's shoulders, "you have to fight it. We need you." But the voice that came from Anna was not her own. "You cannot save her. She belongs to me now." As these words hung in the air, Luan fought against the enveloping darkness of the chamber, calling for his friends. "Mariana, Anna!" His voice cracked with fear, echoing into the void. He felt the dagger pulse in his hand, a sinister energy coursing through it, as if it were alive. In a moment of clarity, he realized the truth. "Anna is the girl from the diary," Luan whispered to himself, horrified. "She's the sacrifice." The realization struck him like a blow, and he raced back up the stairs, heart pounding in his chest. Bursting into the main room, he found Mariana still trying to snap Anna out of her trance. "What's happening?" Luan gasped, panic etched across his face. "We need to get her out of here." "It's too late," Mariana cried, tears streaming down her cheeks as she looked at Anna, who was now convulsing, trapped in a dance between life and death. "She's trapped in the spirit's grasp." Luan felt a wave of desperation wash over him. "No, we can save her." As he reached out for Anna, a shadow loomed over them, dark and twisting, a malevolent force that howled through the cabin, drowning out their cries. In that moment, as the darkness closed in around them, the haunting truth settled in their hearts. They were not just fighting for Anna's life. They were battling against the very essence of a tragic past that threatened to claim them all. The sun hung low in the sky as Lucas, Mariana, Raphael, and Sophia pulled up to the secluded beach cabin. The salty breeze whipped through the open windows of their car, and laughter filled the air as they unloaded their bags. The cabin, perched on a cliff overlooking the ocean, had an old-world charm with its weathered wood and ivy creeping up the sides. Despite its beauty, a sense of unease seeped into the joyous atmosphere, like a shadow lurking just beyond the horizon. "Wow, this place is amazing," Sophia exclaimed, stepping onto the creaky porch. She spun around, arms wide open as if embracing the cabin. "I can't believe we finally made it." Yeah, it's perfect for a getaway, Raphael agreed, but his eyes wandered to the overgrown path leading into the dense woods behind the cabin. Just a little isolated. Isolation is exactly what we need, Lucas replied, trying to shake off the strange feeling that had settled in his gut. He forced a smile, but it didn't quite reach his eyes. Let's explore. They entered the cabin, and the air felt heavy, as if it held whispers of secrets from the past. Dust motes danced in the streams of sunlight that filtered through the windows, and the smell of old wood and sea salt filled their lungs. The living room was adorned with mismatched furniture, and a stone fireplace dominated one wall, its hearth cold and empty. "Look at this place," Mariana said, her voice echoing slightly. She ran her fingers over the rough wooden beams overhead. "It's like something out of a movie." "Yeah, the kind where everyone ends up dead," Raphael muttered, earning him a playful shove from Mariana. "I'm just saying, it has that vibe." "Stop it, you two," Sophia chided, though a grin tugged at her lips. "Let's just relax, I'll get the drinks." As Sophia headed to the kitchen, Lucas felt a strange pull to the corner of the room. He noticed a loose floorboard and knelt down, prying it open. A dusty old trunk lay hidden beneath, its leather cracked and aged. Curiosity piqued. He called out to his friends, "Hey, come check this out." Mariana rushed over, her eyes wide with excitement. "What did you find?" "A trunk," Lucas replied, pulling it out and brushing off the dust. "I wonder what's inside." Raphael shrugged, a hint of skepticism in his voice. "Probably just some old clothes or junk." "Only one way to find out," Mariana said, her eagerness bubbling over as she knelt beside Lucas, helping him to open the trunk. The hinges creaked loudly, and they both winced at the sound. Inside, they found a collection of faded photographs, yellowed letters, and an old journal. The journal, bound in leather, seemed to call out to them. "This is so cool," Mariana exclaimed, flipping through the pages. "Look at these photos. They're ancient." Lucas leaned closer, but a chill ran down his spine as he noticed something unsettling in the images. A couple standing in front of the cabin, their smiles wide but their eyes hauntingly hollow. "Something feels off about these," he murmured, glancing at Raphael, who was now studying the letters. "What do you mean?" Raphael asked, intrigued. "Just look at their eyes," Lucas replied, shivering slightly. "It's like they're hiding something." Before Raphael could reply, Sophia returned, carrying a tray of drinks. "What did I miss?" "We found an old trunk with some weird stuff in it," Mariana said, her excitement uncontainable. "You should see these photos." As they passed the trunk around, the mood shifted when Sophia's gaze caught something on the walls. "Guys, look at these markings," she said, pointing to the faint lines etched into the wood. They weren't just random scratches. They formed patterns that seemed almost deliberate. "What do you think it is?" Raphael asked, leaning in for a closer look. "I don't know. But it looks like it could tell a story," Sophia replied, her voice dropping to a whisper. "A dark one." An uncomfortable silence fell over them as they exchanged glances, the laughter fading into the background. The cabin, once a place of excitement and adventure, now felt like a trap. The atmosphere thickened with unspoken fears, and the thrill of discovery morphed into an unsettling dread. "Let's just enjoy the evening," Lucas suggested, though he could feel the tension lingering in the air. "We'll figure this out later." They nodded, but the weight of the cabin's history hung over them like a storm cloud, ready to burst at any moment. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the room, the friends couldn't shake the feeling that they had awakened something in the cabin, something that had been waiting for them. The sun peeked through the grimy windows of the cabin, casting a pale light that illuminated the dust motes dancing in the air. Raphael shuffled into the bathroom, his bare feet connecting with the cool tiles beneath him. He paused, his heart racing as he noticed something out of the ordinary, a dark red stain splattered on the edge of the bathtub. "Guys, you need to see this," he called, his voice echoing in the confined space. Lucas, Mariana, and Sophia rushed in, their expressions shifting from curiosity to horror as they took in the sight. The stain was unmistakably fresh, a stark contrast against the white porcelain. "What the hell is that?" Mariana whispered, her voice trembling. Blood, Raphael replied, stepping back as if the stain might leap at him. I don't know how else to explain it. Sophia, ever the pragmatist, knelt down to get a closer look. We should investigate this. It could just be something else, maybe paint or I don't know. Paint wouldn't be that color, Lucas countered, his brow furrowed. What if this is connected to what we found yesterday? Mariana shuddered, turning her back to the bathtub as she tried to shake off the creeping dread. I can't believe we're even thinking about this. We should just leave. We can't just ignore it, Raphael insisted, his voice rising. What if there's a serious reason for it? We need to know what happened here. Sophia stood up, brushing the dust off her knees. Okay, let's look up the cabin's history. Maybe there's something online that can explain it. The others nodded, their unease palpable as they stepped out of the bathroom. They gathered around the small, rickety table in the living room, the flickering light of a lamp casting long shadows on the walls. Lucas opened his laptop and connected to the weak Wi-Fi signal, his fingers flying across the keyboard as he searched for any information on the cabin. After a few minutes of searching, he stumbled upon an old news article. Guys, check this out, he said, his voice low. It's about a murder that happened here decades ago. Mariana leaned closer, her eyes widening. What does it say? It was a couple who rented this cabin. They were found dead in the woods nearby. It was brutal. Stab wounds, blood everywhere. The article doesn't go into too much detail, but Lucas trailed off, the weight of the discovery settling heavily on them. Sophia swallowed hard. So this blood, it could be from a previous occupant? Or worse, what if it's linked to the murder? Let's not jump to conclusions, Raphael cautioned, his voice barely above a whisper. We need to stay calm and gather more information. As they continued to read through various articles, their minds raced with possibilities. The cabin, once a picturesque escape, had turned into a haunting reminder of violence. We should search the area, Raphael suggested, determination sparking in his blue eyes. We might find something that ties everything together. Mariana hesitated, glancing at the darkened windows that framed the forest outside. What if we find something dangerous? We can't let fear control us, Lucas replied, a hint of defiance in his tone. We need answers. Reluctantly, they agreed, grabbing flashlights and heading out the door. The sun had fully risen, but a thick canopy of trees loomed overhead, casting eerie shadows across the path. As they ventured deeper into the woods, the air grew colder, a chill running down their spines. I'll take the lead, Raphael said, stepping ahead. Keep an eye out for anything unusual. The group followed closely, their footsteps muffled by the forest floor. Each snap of a twig and rustle of leaves sent waves of anxiety through them. Suddenly, Sophia halted, her flashlight beam illuminating something half buried in the dirt. Wait, look! They gathered around her, their breaths hitching as they focused on the object, an old rusted knife glinting ominously in the light. This could belong to the murderer, Lucas murmured, fear creeping into his voice. Or it could just be a random piece of junk, Sophia replied, but her tone lacked conviction. Raphael picked up the knife, examining it closely. Either way, it's a sign that we're not alone in this. Someone or something is watching us. Let's head back, Mariana urged, her voice trembling. I don't like this. As they turned, an unsettling feeling washed over them, as if the forest itself was holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. Unbeknownst to them, a pair of eyes watched from a distance, hidden among the shadows, lurking in the secrets of the cabin and its dark past. The air was thick with tension as Lucas, Mariana, Raphael, and Sophia wandered deeper into the woods surrounding the cabin. The sun was beginning to dip below the horizon, casting elongated shadows that danced ominously among the trees. They had decided to search the area after their unsettling discoveries back at the cabin, hoping to find any remnants of the dark history they had unearthed. Guys, over here, Raphael called, his voice echoing slightly in the stillness. The others quickly made their way to him, curiosity piquing their anxiety. He knelt on the forest floor, brushing away leaves and dirt to reveal a rusted knife, half buried in the ground. What the hell? Where did you find that? Sophia asked, her eyes widening as she peered over Raphael's shoulder. I don't know, it was just here. It looks really old, Raphael replied, his voice trembling slightly. What if it's connected to whatever happened in the cabin? Mariana stepped closer, her heart racing. We need to take it back. It could be evidence of something sinister. She reached down, taking the knife carefully. It felt cold and heavy in her hand, an unsettling weight that mirrored the dread settling in her stomach. As they made their way back to the cabin, the atmosphere grew heavier. Each snap of a twig underfoot seemed amplified, and the light filtering through the trees took on an eerie quality. Lucas, who had been silent, suddenly broke the tension. "Do you think it's really as bad as we think?" he asked, glancing at the others. "I mean, what if it's all just a coincidence? Old cabins, old knives." Mariana shook her head, her brow furrowed. "We've found bloodstains, strange markings, and now this knife. It's not just coincidence, Lucas. Something terrible happened here." They entered the cabin, and Mariana immediately headed for a drawer she had seen earlier. She rummaged through it, her fingers trembling with anticipation and dread. "There has to be more," she muttered under her breath. "Mariana, are you sure we should be going through this stuff?" Sophia cautioned, her voice barely above a whisper. "What if we find something we're not supposed to?" "Like what?" Mariana shot back, her frustration evident. "More blood? More secrets? We need to know what we're dealing with." Finally, they stumbled upon a stack of faded photographs hidden beneath a pile of old linens. Lucas pulled them out, his heart pounding as he carefully looked through them. The images were worn, but the faces of the people in them were clear enough, smiling couples in front of the cabin, carefree and blissful. Until they reached a photo of a young couple that had a haunting familiarity. "Look at this," Lucas said, his voice trembling. "This couple, they went missing. I read about them online." Sophia leaned in closer, her breath hitching in her throat. "That's them. That's the couple from the story, the one that disappeared without a trace." She shivered, imagining the horror that had unfolded in the very house they were standing in. "What if they're connected to the knife?" Raphael suggested, his voice barely a whisper. "What if we're standing in a graveyard of secrets?" Suddenly, a noise outside silenced their conversation. A low thud echoed through the cabin, causing them all to freeze in place. The sound was followed by a series of rustling noises, like branches being pushed aside. "Did you hear that?" Sophia asked, her voice shaking. "What was that?" "Maybe it's just an animal," Raphael replied, though his voice lacked conviction. "Or maybe it's something else." Lucas moved toward the window cautiously, peering into the encroaching darkness. "I can't see anything." Mariana's expression hardened. "We need to stay alert. This place isn't just creepy, it's dangerous." The group exchanged anxious glances, the weight of their discoveries pressing down on them. The photographs, the knife, the bloodstains, they all pointed to a past too dark to ignore. "Let's just stick together," Lucas suggested, trying to maintain control over the spiraling anxiety. "If there's something out there, we'll face it as a group." "Agreed," Mariana said, clutching the knife tightly as they settled into a tense silence, every creak of the cabin intensifying their fear. Outside, the rustling continued, and the feeling of being watched settled heavily upon them, a reminder that the cabin's secrets were far from buried. The night was heavy with an unsettling silence, broken only by the distant sound of waves crashing against the shore. A low rumble echoed through the cabin, jolting Lucas from his restless sleep. He glanced at his friends who were still nestled under their blankets, oblivious to the disturbance. But as the noise intensified, a series of loud bangs reverberating through the walls, Mariana stirred, her eyes wide with fear. "What was that?" she whispered, her voice barely above a breath. "I don't know," Lucas replied, sitting up and straining to listen. The noise seemed to come from below, from the depths of the cabin. He felt a chill creep down his spine. "Maybe it's just the wind." "Wind doesn't bang like that," Raphael exclaimed, now awake and rubbing his eyes. "It sounded like something or someone is trying to get in." Sophia, who had also awakened, swung her legs over the side of the bed. "We need to check it out. It could be an animal or something. Or it could be something worse," Mariana said, her voice trembling. "I don't think we should go down there." "Guys, let's just stay here," Lucas suggested, his heart racing. "We can wait until morning." But before he could finish, another loud thud resonated through the cabin, making the walls tremble. This time, the noise was accompanied by a scratching sound, They all exchanged frightened glances, the gravity of their situation sinking in. "Let's pack our things and leave at first light," Raphael decided, his voice firm despite the fear that flared in his eyes. "We're not safe here." As they began to gather their belongings, Sophia hesitated by the door. "What if we're not alone?" she whispered, glancing nervously toward the window where the darkness seemed to thicken. "Stop it," Mariana snapped, her anxiety bubbling over. "We don't need to be thinking like that right now." "Maybe we should look for another way out," Lucas suggested, trying to keep the tension at bay. "There might be a back door or something." But before they could continue, Sophia's voice broke through the chaos. "Wait, there's something here." She pointed toward a corner of the living room, her eyes wide with curiosity and fear. "What do you mean?" Raphael asked, stepping cautiously toward her. "There's a cellar door," Sophia replied, motioning to the worn wooden panel partially hidden behind an old bookshelf. "I didn't see it before." As they approached, the air seemed to grow heavier, thick with unspoken dread. Lucas knelt before the cellar door and brushed off the dust, revealing rusty hinges that creaked ominously as he pulled it open. A cold draft wafted up from the depths, carrying a musty scent that was almost suffocating. "Should we go down?" Mariana asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "What if it's dangerous?" "We need to know what's down there," Lucas insisted, his curiosity piqued. "We can't leave without understanding what we're dealing with." Raphael nodded, steeling himself. "All right, let's check it out. But we stick together." With a flashlight in hand, Lucas descended the creaky steps, his heart pounding in his chest. The others followed closely, the beam of light revealing a small, dimly lit room, cluttered with dust-covered artifacts. Old newspapers, tattered and yellowed, lay strewn across a table, alongside various objects that sent shivers down their spines. Broken dolls, rusted chains, and a collection of photographs depicting people with expressions of despair. "What is all this?" Sophia gasped, her voice echoing in the eerie silence. "This looks like—" Raphael began, but his words trailed off as he picked up a newspaper article, the headline reading, "Mysterious Disappearances Plague Local Cabin." Mariana's breath hitched. "This can't be real. It's like a shrine to whatever happened here." As they sifted through the disturbing artifacts, the reality of their situation hit them like a wave. They were not just vacationers. They were unwitting participants in a dark history. "We need to call the police," Lucas said, a sense of urgency creeping into his voice. "We can't keep this to ourselves." But as they scrambled for their phones, panic settled over them. One by one, they checked their devices, each face falling as the realization set in. There was no signal. "No way," Raphael muttered, frustration mixing with fear. "This can't be happening." "We're trapped here," Sophia breathed, her eyes darting around the room as if expecting someone to emerge from the shadows. "For one more night." Tension thickened the air, and the distant sound of waves no longer felt soothing, but ominous, as if they were a warning echoing through the dark past of the cabin. They were caught in a web of secrets that bound them to the very place they had sought for relaxation, and now, with no means of escape, they could only wait for what the night would bring. As the darkness deepened around the cabin, an oppressive silence settled in, broken only by the sound of their own anxious breathing. Lucas stood near the window, peering through the grimy glass, his heart racing. "I swear I just saw something move outside," he said, his voice low and tense. Mariana, sitting on the edge of the sofa, looked up with wide eyes. "What do you mean? Like a person?" She shifted nervously, the realization of their dire situation weighing heavily on her shoulders. "I'm not sure," Lucas replied, glancing back at her. "It was just a shadow, but it felt wrong." A chill ran down his spine as he recalled the unsettling noises that had woken them just hours before. Sophia, who had been pacing the small room, halted abruptly. "We need to barricade the door. If someone is out there, we can't take any chances." She moved to grab a heavy wooden table, her hands trembling slightly as she pushed it against the door. "Are we really going to lock ourselves in here?" Raphael asked, a hint of disbelief creeping into his tone. "What if it's just an animal or something?" "An animal doesn't make those kinds of sounds," Mariana snapped, her anxiety spilling over. We've already found bloodstains and weapons. We can't ignore the possibility that someone or something wants to harm us." Lucas nodded, feeling the weight of her words. "We need to be smart about this. If it is a person, we can't let them inside." He joined Sophia in barricading the door, pushing the table with all his strength until it was firmly wedged against the frame. Outside, the footsteps returned, slow and deliberate, echoing in the still night air. The group held their breath, straining to listen. "Do you hear that?" Raphael whispered, his voice barely a murmur. "Yes," Sophia replied, her eyes darting toward the window. "It's getting closer." A moment later, they all turned as a shadow moved past the window, briefly illuminated by the moonlight. "What was that?" Mariana gasped, gripping the arm of the sofa tightly. Lucas swallowed hard, his throat dry. "Stay quiet. We need to listen." The footsteps paused, and for a moment there was an eerie silence. Then they heard a soft, rustling sound outside, as if someone was searching for a way in. Raphael leaned closer to the window, squinting into the darkness. "I can't see anything. It could be anyone." "Or anything," Mariana added, her voice trembling. "What if it's the ghost of whoever got killed here? Or what if it's the murderer?" "Enough," Lucas snapped, his control slipping. "We need to focus on staying safe. Panic isn't going to help us." As if in response to his words, a loud thud struck the door, causing them all to jump. "Did you hear that?" Sophia cried, her face pale. Another thud echoed, followed by a low, almost inaudible voice from outside. "Let me in!" The words drifted through the air like a dark omen, sending chills down their spines. "What do we do?" Mariana's voice rose in pitch, her fear palpable. "Shh! Don't answer!" Lucas hissed, pressing his back against the wall. We wait until morning. We're safer here." The group huddled together, fear etched on their faces, their eyes darting to the door with every noise. Minutes felt like hours as the figure outside continued to pace, occasionally stopping to whisper incoherent phrases. "Why don't they just leave?" Raphael muttered, his voice trembling. "They could have left us alone." "Maybe they want something," Sophia suggested, her eyes wide with terror. "Or maybe they want us to come out." The hours dragged on, and just when they thought the figure had finally left, the footsteps returned, louder and more urgent. "Let me in," the voice called again, more insistent this time, as if it belonged to someone they knew. Lucas exchanged glances with the others, their expressions a mix of terror and confusion. "What if it's someone we know?" he whispered, his brow furrowing. Mariana shook her head vehemently. "No one we know would be out there. It's not safe." "I don't care who it is. I'm not opening that door," Raphael declared, his voice firm as the figure outside began to pound on the door, shaking the cabin with each blow. "Please, let me in," the voice begged, rising in desperation. "I'm trapped. I need help." As the pounding intensified, the four friends clung to each other, their hearts racing in unison, caught in a web of fear, uncertainty, and the chilling realization that whatever lurked outside was not just a figment of their imagination. As dawn broke, the first light of the day seeped through the grimy windows of the cabin, casting eerie shadows on the walls. Lucas, still shaken from the events of the previous night, was the first to rise. He looked around at his friends, their faces pale and drawn, each still grappling with the terror that had gripped them. "Guys, we need to get out of here, like right now," Lucas urged, his voice hoarse. He could see the fear mirrored in their eyes as they hurriedly gathered their belongings. "Do you think that shadowy figure is still out there?" Sophia asked, her voice trembling. She had a tight grip on her backpack, as if it were a lifeline. "I don't know, but I'm not sticking around to find out," Raphael replied, glancing out the window, half expecting to see the figure lurking in the bushes. The woods outside seemed more menacing in the daylight, the trees casting long, spindly shadows that danced with the slightest breeze. Mariana, who had been unusually quiet, looked at her friends with a mix of determination and fear. "We need to report what we found to the police. They need to know about the cellar, about everything." Her voice was steady, but the flicker of anxiety in her eyes betrayed her resolve. They made their way to the car, fumbling with the keys as if the act itself was a choreographed dance of terror. Lucas drove, heart racing, the road ahead feeling like both a lifeline and a trap. The cabin faded into the background, but the memories clawed at them, heavy and suffocating. As they reached the nearest town, they rushed into the small police station, breathless and frantic. "We need to speak with someone," Lucas blurted out, approaching the front desk where a bored officer sat, a donut in one hand and a coffee in the other. "Calm down, son," the officer replied, looking up with a raised eyebrow. "What seems to be the problem?" With a flurry of words, the group recounted their harrowing experience, the bloodstains, the cellar, and the artifacts. The officer listened, his expression shifting from skepticism to concern as they unfolded their story. "All right, let's take you to Officer Daniels. He'll want to hear this," the officer said, gesturing for them to follow him into the back. Soon they found themselves seated across from a seasoned detective, his brow furrowed in concentration as he took notes. After they shared everything they had uncovered, Officer Daniels leaned back in his chair, his gaze piercing. "This is serious," he said, his voice low. "I'll send a team to investigate the cabin right away." Relief washed over them, but it was short-lived. As they stepped outside, the weight of their discovery began to settle in. They had done the right thing, hadn't they? But as they drove back home, an unsettling silence enveloped the car. It was Mariana who broke it, her voice barely above a whisper. "What if we were wrong? What if we misinterpreted everything?" "Mariana, we found blood. This was a crime scene," Raphael snapped, his frustration boiling over. "Maybe we should have just left it alone," Sophia added, her eyes darting nervously between her friends. As the tension thickened, Lucas's phone buzzed violently, cutting through the heavy atmosphere. He picked it up, his heart dropping as he read the message. "It's the police," he said, his voice trembling. "They want to know if any of us have connections to the cabin's previous owner." "What? Why?" Mariana asked, her face paling. "They're saying the owner claims he was framed," Lucas continued, panic rising in his chest, "and that you, Mariana, have a family tie to the original murderer." Mariana's face drained of color. "That's impossible. My family has nothing to do with that." "But what if it's true?" Raphael asked, his voice edged with suspicion. The accusation hung in the air, a heavy fog of betrayal settling among them. They exchanged glances, a mixture of horror and disbelief rippling through the group. "Mariana, you need to tell us everything," Lucas said, his voice steady but demanding. "If there's something we don't know, if you've been hiding something, we need to know now." "I swear, I don't," Mariana began, but her voice cracked, the weight of their distrust suffocating her words. As they drove on, the road stretched before them, but the path ahead felt obscured by shadows. The cabin of secrets had not only unveiled horrors from the past, but was also tearing apart their present. Their friendships, once unbreakable, now hung by a fraying thread, the truth threatening to unravel everything they thought they knew.